Welcome to Git Makes Sense Until Other People Get Involved. My name is April Sides. I'm a principal software engineer at Red Hat. Been here a little over 4 years now. I don't do, it's a Linux company, but I actually do Drupal at Red Hat with the customer portal and various other support sites and redhat.com. So yeah, here's my contact information. And where's the button? Where is it going? There we go. All right. So we're going to go through a little overview of Git. How many people are familiar with Git? Pretty familiar. Yeah, a little bit. Okay. So we'll go through that, and then we're going to talk about branching strategies for working within a team. We'll talk a little bit about deployment strategies and how the code gets from the repo to be deployed as your website, and then we'll have a little time for questions. So an overview, what is Git? Git is a popular open source version control system used to track and manage changes to digital files. I like to tell people who are not tech friendly that it's kind of like Google Docs version control. I know that Google Docs doesn't use Git in their version control, but it kind of gives that concept of being able to see changes and restore changes and things like that. So Git can be used locally on your local machine, and maybe you're already doing that a little bit, but it can be shared remotely when you push your code to GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket and those sort of things to be able to share it within a team or be able to deploy it for a site. To get started with Git, you can follow this tutorial here with Atlassian as a good tutorial, but you can install it locally using your Apple Homebrew, your Mac ports, various different tools to install it locally. You can use a graphical user interface. Does anybody use a graphical user interface instead of command line? Sometimes. So most people are using command line at this point, yeah? Okay. So yeah, you can use that to kind of visualize the changes a little bit. If you're using Visual Studio Code, there is a Git Lens plugin that you can use that can help you visualize things. And I highly recommend this one if you're not using. Is anybody here using Oh My Z Shell? This was something I learned about not early in my career, and I was like, how did I go without it? Because what I like about it is that it shows you in your command line interface what directory you're in, and then with Git, what branch you're on. So you can really see where you are in the command line. And it's a pretty lightweight tool to add to your computer. Common Git commands, we're all fairly familiar here. You can initialize local repos with git init. You can do git add period to add everything in that directory, and then do a git commit -m with a message that says this is the initial repository or whatever your changes later on. So a Git repository is a central storage location for managing and tracking changes in files and directories. I guess I already kind of said that. So looking at remote repositories, let's say that you are starting with a project that's already on one of these repos. You can use the code button on, I think this one's GitHub, yep, and the other one's GitLab. And it gives you prompts on what to use to clone that repo and that code to your local machine. So you just do a git clone, and then whatever that thing that you copied and pasted from some of these options here. And then you can change your directory, CD, into your project directory. This is just an example. So there's two different options, HTTPS or I can't remember what this one's called. Is it SSH or? Yeah. Two different options. I don't know the details about which one to use, but usually it's based on whatever your company or your project team is using. So you can check out branches that exist or that don't exist. I guess this one is checking. This is an example of checking out an existing branch. And so it's going to, when you do that, it's going to update the files in your project directory to match that version that was committed to the branch. So if you were, let's say you're on a Mac, because I usually work on a Mac, if you have Finder open and you run the commands in the command line interface, you'll see the files change. Or if you're viewing them in VS Code, you'll see the files change if there are visual changes there. So you check out your branch, and you make some changes, and then you can stage those changes. I like to use git add-p. It's called like interactive mode. And what it does is it just allows you to step through all the changes line by line. When there's like major composer changes, it might be a little bit overkill for what I do, but it's more for my muscle memory that I just go through and review each chunk of changes and decide if I want that to be staged to be committed with my commit. So I may have like a file or something that's changed, and I'm like, oh, I don't want that to be a part of this commit or something like that. I can kind of review my changes as I'm adding it to the stage. And I really only use the Y and the N, but there's lots of different options, and I don't know what those are, but there's a link here, and I'll have the slides available after the talk to know what some of the other options are. You can use get status, so it will show you all of the changes that are staged, all the things that are maybe changed and not staged, things that aren't tracked. It gives you just an overview of what's going on. It tells you if you're like behind or ahead in changes from the repo, the remote repo, and that sort of thing. Then when you're ready to commit your changes, you do the get commit-n, and it will record those changes into your local Git repository, and then we'll be able to push those up to the remote repo. All right, is that everybody still with me? Okay, sweet. All right, so branching strategies, and when I'm talking about this, you may be in projects that use a more legacy master branch. A lot of newer projects use a main branch. So if you come across a project that's using master or main, that's a similar concept to what I'm talking about. I think I refer to it as main in the rest of the slide deck, but yeah. All right, so we have some branching strategies here. We have some trunk-based strategies where you're committing to a main branch, where you're doing some feature branching, and then we're going to talk about git flow and forking a little bit. All right, so committing to the main branch. How many people here are making changes and committing them to a main branch? Okay. So this workflow looks something like this. This is an example here. We've got two developers, Ezra and Sabine. I think I was on a Star Wars kick when I made this long ago. So each of these developers are pulling main branch, making their changes and committing them directly to the main branch, and then pushing that up to the main repo. So they're checking out main, they're doing a git pull to get the latest from the main branch from the remote repo, making their changes, staging them, and then committing them. Then they'll push it, git push origin main. So some of the pros and cons to this sort of thing is it is a simple workflow. You can move fast. It's great for small teams that are in close communication throughout the development experience, and you can identify bugs really quickly, I guess is one benefit there. But you do have to manage code conflicts, and you do risk breaking things like on production if you are modifying the main branch, and let's say you have like an automatic deployment script that's going to push that to production, you could break the site and then have to scramble and figure out what broke it. There are reviewing and testing challenges, and I'll talk about the benefits of some other branching strategies that make reviewing and testing a lot easier. It is harder to roll back and recover, a little bit complex there, and like feature flag complexity as well. And like feature flag means that the code is there, but you have an app configuration that can turn on the feature on an independent of a deployment. So I would say like you push a module up, but you install it in the UI or something like that for a Drupal example. All right, feature branches. How many people are already using feature branches? Sweet. Why are you all here? All right, so in this case, we've got our two developers, and they are working on feature branches. So their workflow is going to be they're going to check out the main branch, they're going to do a git pull to pull the latest changes from that branch. Then they're going to do this git checkout -b, which is going to create a new branch. And let's say they call it feature /username / if you're working on like Jira tickets or things like that, I like to have like a ticket number in there and a short description. You make your changes just like you would do if you're working off the main branch before. You stage your changes, you do your commit, And then you might want to, depending on how long you've been working on a project or on a particular feature, and maybe how many other people are also working on the project, you probably want to do a git pull or git checkout of main and pull the latest changes from main, and then check out your feature branch again and merge main into your feature branch so you know if there's going to be any kind of brokenness or anything like that before you even push up to the repo. And then we may have some merge conflicts here. So a merge conflict is where the same lines of code are modified in both branches. So it's basically saying, what do you want me to do here? It gives you the control to say, okay, I want this bit, I want to tweak this a little bit. It happens. And so I think this is a screenshot from VS Code. So VS Code does have a merge editor. So if you do the merge of main into your feature branch, and it says there's conflicts, if you look at any of the files that have conflicts, you'll see some weird stuff here, like the head and then hash number there. But if you open the merge editor, you get a better interface of I think this is the incoming changes. So this would be what's coming from the main branch, what was in your feature branch, and then you get to figure out what it actually needs to be in this bottom window. It's a lot easier. I did have an example at PHP Storm. Anybody use PHP Storm still? Cool, yeah. I definitely prefer PHP Storm's editor. So you can do the resolve conflicts. You have the ability to accept all of the left. So the left, I believe, are your local changes. So this is a feature branch. The one on the right is what would be coming in from main, and the middle is what we're trying to make what we want it to actually be. So you can say, I'm going to accept all the right changes and just be done with it, or you can go through and there's these little arrows where it'll just insert the code into the middle, or you can hit the X and say, no, I don't want that stuff, and you can leave it. It's very helpful. All right, so once your conflicts are resolved, then you can stage those changes if there were any, and then do, if it's a resolving comment or conflicts, you can do a git commit no edit, and it doesn't require you to provide a message. This is actually something I learned when I did the training with these slides before. Somebody told me about it. I usually just do Shift Z or whatever, muscle memory. But you can just say no edit, and it will just keep the normal merged main into feature branch, all of those messages there. When in doubt, abort the merge and start over. Sometimes I'll go through, even in the editor, and I'll be like, oh, wait a minute, I don't think I was supposed to do that. I'm just going to back out of this. You can do git merge abort, and it'll take you back as if you weren't merging at all. Then you can re-merge it in and go through the conflicts again. All right, so once we've resolved our conflicts, we can push it up to origin as normal. I got this view in here, and I didn't even think about this before when I did the training initially. What it does is it tells your local that it's going to make a connection to the remote repos branch, which I don't know why it doesn't happen automatically because you're pushing it up. But if you don't do it, and then somebody made changes on your feature branch, and you tried to pull them to add more changes, it's going to be like, what branch are you talking about? And then you have to do more work to connect it. So I highly recommend remembering to do the -u when you do your first origin push of a feature branch. So when you look at this example over here, just to kind of see the workflow, this developer's maybe pulled the main branch and created the feature branch here, and this developer started a little bit later, they've made their changes, and then they are merging into that main branch at different spots in time there. All right, merge and pull requests. Okay, so who is familiar with merge or pull requests workflow in a GitLab or GitHub? I think GitLab is merge request, GitHub is pull request. So what this does is that you are requesting to the project that you want to have your changes pulled or merged into a target branch. And it provides a great interface for reviewing code. So when we are setting up the merge request, we're going to tell it what is our source branch, which is the branch we just pushed up, our feature branch, and we want to target the main branch in this particular example. And what it does is it gives this interface that shows all the changes as if you did like a git diff, but it's very color-coded. And it also adds the ability to like add comments and have conversations about what this code is doing or how it could be improved. Makes it, especially in a team-based development environment, being able to collaborate and make sure you're delivering the best code. All right, so the pros and cons of feature branches. The pros are that developers can commit early and often, and there's less risk of breaking commits and blocking other developers. So if we're all merging into main and something breaks, then everybody's blocked at that point until those conflicts are resolved. At least with a feature branch, you can continue to work on your feature branch, and that's somebody else's problem, or whoever broke it's problem, right? To figure out, or the lead developers. The cons are that we do have to deal with merge conflicts, and that's a difference from just pushing to the main branch. And your feature branches can become outdated. One thing at work we do is like a quarterly clearing of your branches. Like if you pushed up something you were testing and then you never touched it, you could go and like just clear out those old branches that are not needed anymore. All right, everybody still with me? Cool. It's all making sense, right? Okay, Git flow. So Git flow is a Git branching model with specific naming conventions and release management workflow. How many people are working Git flow or Git flow-ish?
Ish.
Yeah, right. It's kind of like Agile, right? You tweak it how you need to. So the default branch naming conventions. So we've got a branch name for production releases is main. So that main branch is always going to be what drives production. And we'll talk about the deployment pipeline a little bit too. Branch names for a next release is a develop branch. So a lot of times we're going to work from the develop branch, and I'll show that in a minute. Feature branches are going to be prefixed with feature, and release branches will be prefixed with release, and hotfix branches will be hotfix prefixed. And we'll go through this a little bit. There is a Git extension, which I don't use because I'm worried it's going to do something and I don't know what's going on. But it is git-flow, and it gives you some commands that kind of make the process a little bit easier, if you're interested in that. All right, we're getting a little bit more complicated on the right here with the demo. So the workflow for a developer is going to be, you're going to check out develop instead of the main branch. So we're always working from that develop branch, and we are checking out and creating feature branches off of the develop branch. You make your changes, you stage your changes just as we've been doing. You do your commit, and then, since we are merging into develop, again, if you want to pull the changes from develop just to make sure there's not going to be any merge conflicts once you push your code up to the remote repo, you can check out develop, pull the changes, check out your feature branch again, and then merge it and resolve your merge conflicts. And then push it to the remote repo and create your merge or pull request. So this time we've got our feature branch as the source branch, but this time we're targeting develop. And then how does the code get from develop to main? How does this process happen? It's through releases. And so I've got this is more like a release manager. I did say it was like a tech lead before, but we actually have our QE, our quality engineers, doing our releases to kind of a separation of concerns and part of our process. So they're going to, in order to create the release branch, you're going to check out the develop branch. You're going to pull the latest changes to your local if you're doing this locally. And then you're going to create, instead of a feature branch, it's going to be a release branch with whatever your release naming convention is for your project. And then we'll push that to the remote repo. So this one, because it's a release branch, is the release branch, and it's going to target main. And so now we want to create, let's see, what do I get here? Merge release MR, create the release tag. All right, so this is creating the actual release, I believe. So if we're going to check out main, we're going to pull the latest changes from main. We're going to check out develop. We're going to pull the latest changes from develop. We're going to merge main into develop and push develop branch up. So this is after the release has gone through, the changes are now all on the main branch, I think. I might be confusing myself. Okay. So any changes that are main will now be in the develop branch where everybody is working. So a release tag is a specific point in the repository's history that is significant, right? So it's going to reference this point in the code, and you can deploy a release. You can deploy a tag instead of saying the production environment is the code base is main. You can make it a tag specific so that you can actually deploy and change it in a more flexible way. So an example is like software versions, right? We all get the updates on our phones and such, and you see all the subversions and things like that. All right, so hotfixes. This is when production is broken, that everybody's working on all their stuff, and you need to push something just to production to fix the issue, right? So in this case, you're gonna I think I call it senior developer because that's the one who's on the hook for fixing the thing that's broken in most cases. So you're going to check out your main branch. This time we're working from main in this particular case. Pull the latest from main and check out a hotfix. And then this is, since we had a release that is 1.2, and this is going to come out before the next release where there's a sprint release or whatever, I'm making this 1.2, and you can even do 1.2.1 to say it's, oh, see, I messed up. The code here is right, or wrong, and it's right up there. You're doing like a, what do you call it, a patch release kind of thing. So you'll make your changes, you'll fix the issue. It might take longer, who knows. Stage those changes just as we've been doing, and then you're going to push it to the remote repo and do another merge request or pull request. And so your hotfix branch, just like the release branch, is going to target main. And then once you've merged your hotfix into main, this is the case where you really need to pull in the latest changes from main. Actually, when we do the releases, this creates commits when you do that merge, and that's why we pull main into develop once the release is done. But in this case, in the hotfix, there's new changes that are going into main, so we definitely want to make sure we've got that pulled back into the develop branch, so we don't have any merge conflicts or issues going forward. So this is our workflow. Check out main, get pulled, check out develop, get pull, merge main into develop, and then push develop up to the origin. So what are the pros and cons of Git flow? You have the concept of a stable branch. So especially like with security concerns, you can make the main branch a protected branch in things like GitLab and GitHub. So you can say none of the developers should be able to make commits on this branch. They should only be able to make merge requests to this branch. And the protected branch. And it pairs well with agile sprint cycles, with like the release process. Team that I worked on previously, you would do all your work in the sprint, and at the end of the sprint, you would have it user acceptance testing period, testing to see if it's okay. Our QE people would do some quality assurance testing, and then it would get deployed. So you're releasing, like on your sprint cycle. In the team I'm on right now, we actually do more continuous releasing, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the deployment part. But it's still similar. The release team is iterating and controlling the releases, but they can do it more often and just like grouping features and things like that. Some of the cons is it is a complex workflow. Like if you were maybe a couple developers, this might be a little bit overkill for you. If you're in good communication, you will move a little bit slower, and again, your feature branches can become outdated. But this is probably the most common workflow I've used in my career. Is that true for most people in this room? Yeah. Then there's a concept of forking. And forking is a thing that is specific to these remote repositories. You can have an example project here. There's the ability to create a fork, and it creates a copy of that repo. Because in most cases, this is it could be in like an open source. It's a little bit different from Drupal. I think the MR process, the merge request process that Drupal's following is sort of heading us in this direction, but it will create a copy of the project that you can edit and commit to. And then when you're ready, you can request a merge or pull request to the main, the parent project or whatever, the source project. So it's, when you do your merge request, it'll be your project. Let's see, source project, yeah. Your project, the target project is where the one you forked from, so it's the owner's project. And then you can still have your feature branching, just like before, and your target branch, depending on the workflow of that project. So the pros in this sort of setup is that your project repo is more secure. So like I was saying, like this is common in open source projects you might find on GitHub or something like that, where they don't want to accept merge requests, so they don't want to open up the project to anybody. So they can, but they can still accept changes during this flow. It's easier to receive contributions that are external to an organization. So you may even have this kind of setup with a contractor, or as a contractor, you might have to fork a repo or things like that. I recently had to fork a project at work because they had automations in place where I could set up a merge request, and they had I think it was a pipeline job on a cron job that would do something and like merge it in and like review it and things like that, but they don't have that repo open. You have to use the fork. But it is a more complex workflow, like maybe more complex than GitFlow. It does have a less centralized development process, and your forks themselves have to be kept up to date with the main project, which is probably, I think, one of the more complex pieces of doing a forking style of branching. All right, any questions about like branching strategies? All right, so we'll talk a little bit about deployment. How does this code now get to where my website is? We'll talk a little bit about environments. We have our local development environments. We may have preview environments, and that was another thing with the Git flow, having a feature branch and having merge requests. You may have the opportunity to have a preview of those changes, and we'll talk about that. Pre-production sites, you may have like a dev, a QA, a stage, environments that are persistent, and a production environment. So your local environment allows you to run the site on your computer. You can make and test the changes. We're using, probably a lot of people using DDev in here at this point, yeah. But Lando does exist. Doxel is still used from experience. We are still using Doxel. And then preview environments, they give you a temporary preview of if that code had merged into the target branch, what would the site look like? So you can just test it out. You may have, let's say you forgot some config. That's a great way to figure out, like, why aren't my changes showing? Oh, I forgot to export the config and commit it and deploy it upstream. So great for code review. This Tugboat is actually a sponsor of Camp that's here. Allows you to fairly easily plug into your workflow to create preview environments off of branches, off of tags, I think, too. And they've got a lot of things going on there, too. Your pre-production environments, so these are your permanent sites for staging and can be a part of your deployment process. They're great for the QA of the deployment process. Things like services like Acquia and Pantheon have this concept of having like a dev stage and prod, or they may have other environments that you can add. And then your production environment is your live website. That's a great slide, right? One bullet point, a lot of white space. All right, so looking at the Acquia environment, this is showing the dev environment and the stage environment. You can see that the dev environment is running on the master or the main branch. And then the stage one has a tag, is using their code base is driven by this tag. And what is cool about these applications that Acquia and Pantheon provide is that you can drag and drop your code from environment to environment, and your databases and your files and things like that. It just makes it a lot easier to manage your environments. And then this is just the other side of that image. You've got prod, and it's also on this tags welcome tag. All right, so how does the code move between environments besides being able to drag and drop in these cool interfaces? It's called continuous development. So continuous development includes continuous integration. So your developers are merging their changes into a main branch frequently, and your continuous delivery is working software is ready to release at all times in a simple, repeatable deployment process. So you may have heard of the CI/CD pipelines. These are automations that build and test and deploy your code upstream to production. And it's typically a function of DevOps. How many people in here do the DevOps thing, do the actual deployment scripting? A little bit? Okay. Yeah. We wear many hats here in this community here. All right, so DevOps is an intersection of software development and operations. Your DevOps engineers develop and maintain the infrastructure and tools and processes to support the software development lifecycle. So this is an example of GitLab, and let's say we've pushed up. You can have things triggered by a merge to main. Let's say our, what is merging to main are our releases, right? So let's say all our features have been merged into a release branch, and now we're going to deploy that. These pipeline jobs can run once you've triggered that merge. So it's going to build it, and this is like, let's say the release merges into main, but it's going to kick off these processes. It's going to build it. It might run through some tests. It might do a deployment to maybe the QA environment or something like that. But notice that this one is more of a manual button that you'd have to click, so that it's not going to just push everything to prod. That would be quite scary. All right. This is, let's see, when you create a merge request. So this would be like your feature branch. Yeah, your feature branch is set up to run through some pipeline jobs as well to do some tests. And here's an example of being able to see a preview. You can self-build your own preview code or whatever, your feature, to be able to preview what this merge request is going to look like once it merges. This one merges into main. But you can do these checks to make sure that everything is passing, and run linters and build the preview environment. So linters are just a tool that analyzes the source code for errors, vulnerabilities, and coding standard issues to improve your code quality. So you can have these running on your local machine, but just for the consistency of everybody in the team using the same tool here, you can have those things run on the merge requests and be like, this has to be fixed. This pipeline failed. So you need to fix something before this can merge. Those sorts of things are great in using merge request workflow. And they can block the merges or the deployments, however you want to configure it. GitHub Actions also has similar things. It looks a little bit different, but they've got build, test, publish, and will tell you when it's ready to merge and give you the big green button. Okay, so how does the code move from our local to production? I think this is just my walkthrough. We're just going to picture this. We're going to clone or pull the repo or the remote repo to our local and create a new feature branch from the develop branch. We're going to make our changes, we're going to stage them, we're going to commit them, and we're going to push them up to the repo and create a merge request or pull request to merge those into the develop branch, in this case, like a get flow. At that point, we can say, hey, I need somebody to review my code on the merge request or pull request. Once this passes and everything's good to go here, we might have a QA team, quality assurance team, review the merge request, make some tests on the preview environment, and then when it's good to go, they will merge that into develop. At the end of our sprint cycle, or once the release manager has decided that this group of features is ready to deploy, they can create a release branch from the develop branch. They will create a merge request or pull request targeting the main branch from develop, or from the release branch, sorry. The QA team, quality assurance team, will review the merge request or pull request. If you have these preview environments, it makes it really easy to make sure that the release is going to go deploy smoothly. And then we're going to merge the release, merge request, into main. We may create a release tag to pinpoint when this release, like this release code. We'll merge main into develop to get any of those commits that were created whenever you were deploying or merging the release. We'll deploy the release to a pre-production environment like your dev or your stage, and then QA can then again release on the pre-prod environments and test and make sure everything's going to be good once you get to production. When you get to like enterprise level, this is very important stuff, right? I know like if you're doing a smaller site, this might seem like super overkill, but when lots of customers are depending on a site or something, then you want to make sure you're not sending out broken code. Nobody likes to put out fires. All right, so then everything looks good to go on the pre-prod environment, so we can deploy to production. There'll even be QA on production to make sure everything is the way we expected it. And then you may communicate the release to either content editors or even to customers. I mean, like this is, you get those release notes on your phone when your phone's updated, bug fixes, and that might be all you get. But it can be as little or as much as you want to provide. So there are some resources. Atlassian has a lot of good resources for learning about Git and how all these things work together. There's also this site, if you ever get in a bind in Git, maybe you want to do dang it Git, but you can use either one of those. And yeah, that's all I really have today. If anyone has any questions. All right, covered it all. Oh, you got one.
Oh, merge, rebase, that kind of stuff.
Merge, rebase.
When you're doing rebases and you get things, or when you're doing a merge or a push, right? Or a pull, and you get the messages about merge or rebase.
Merge, rebase. So it's not merge conflicts.
No, it's not merge. You're pulling in, and it's telling you're different. So you've got to either rebase or you've got to ignore it or fast forward. You can explain some of those things.
I don't hit those rebase issues. So
I don't usually either, but we've started to. So I'm trying to figure out what the heck is going on.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to repeat the question. So he's asking, like, what do you do when you get the message? So you're pulling in changes, like, to a feature branch or to, okay. Pulling changes from a remote repo to your local, and you have your feature branch. Is it in progress? Is that also is like the feature branch work in progress?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just refreshing from the branch that I started from.
Okay. So just getting a refresh, making sure that you have the latest code. And you're getting like a rebase, like you got a rebase telling you to rebase.
You've got to either rebase it or I can't remember what exactly the I've got too much history to look at.
Yeah. So what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was just wondering if if the message was about like someone else potentially rebased your branch upstream and now you have to deal with that, or if the literal message from Git is like, do you want to merge or rebase?
That's what it says. Do you want to merge or rebase or do a fast forward?
Yeah, there's definitely some different techniques for the rebasing and for the merging. I've not gotten too deep into that. So what it's saying is like, you've got your feature branch and maybe you have a few commits and then you're pulling in the code. Do you want to have your code changes kind of like, you want it to kind of insert itself before your code commits and then like reapply your commits that you've done, and like what order do you want things to be like merged, smashed together? It's just giving you options on that, and that makes it more complicated because you're like, what?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But.
Yeah. You have an idea?
No,
or a question?
Another question.
Okay.
tags, like what do you usually use for tags? Like, say 3 features got added, you add a tag, and then that one gets deployed.
Yeah, I think.
What convention do you usually use for like tag naming?
Right. So the question is about when do you use tagging? Like, what's a tagging strategy? I guess. I think like it's helpful to tag releases, so you know that this code went to production, and it just keeps track of that mostly, and for communication and like, this was the release. This is what changed in that release. Like, and we have like Confluence. We have access to Confluence and Jira, and it's what we use. And so you can, like create these release pages where you can name the tag, you can kind of create some metadata when it released and has it released, and then pull in all of the Jira tickets in like a list, a dynamic list for that release, if anything's tagged with like a fixed version or something like that, and be able to see what actually changed. And that's kind of helpful. It's really just like, just like the way we do feature branch naming, where we have like feature slash username / issue number with a short description. It just kind of keeps a record of making it easier to kind of like, if let's say you are putting out a fire, something's broken and you're trying to like find things, just all of these things kind of build a history and ability to kind of troubleshoot. But if you release a tag and let's say something breaks during that release, you can roll back to the previous tag. If your database hasn't updated, that could also be a complication. But yeah, it just kind of gives you these reference points of being able to roll back and like deploy in different ways.
So you just do like 2.1, 2.2, 2.2.
Yeah, you could do that. We've done like if we had like let's say like a major update to the site or something that feels more major. That this is a very different. I didn't talk about it, but we've used the concept of integration branches too. Let's say I used an integration branch when I was upgrading from Drupal 10.4 to 11, I believe. And so I can kind of have this integration branch over here, and I can just do feature branches to the integration branch without having to worry about a lot of merge conflicts for any ongoing development from other developers. And then, okay, I've got this ready to deploy, and this is, let's say, an upgrade in Drupal. Maybe I decide I want to up that. So you're saying like if it's on 2.2, I may decide that this is a 3.0 release or something like that. It can kind of help you gauge those as well, if that's helpful. Yeah.
Like think of semantic versioning.
Yeah. And it's really up to you. Sometimes the tags end up with a V in front of it too. Like I think it's fairly open-ended.
I got another question.
Yeah.
What do you do so you do a deployment to production and then you realize there's a problem. What do you usually do?
What do I do? I try not to panic.
Yeah.
No, if you're deploying to production, what happens if things go sideways and don't work? We have processes, so like all of our deployments are push button. So there's something that's going to happen. It's going to make a backup of the database usually, then try to deploy the stuff. And if something fails, then it has like some automated rollback processes in that script.
Well, like imagine that'll work. It's actually a problem in the code that got pushed
in the code.
And that's what you like, so it's either, like my experience is do a pull request to undo it, which I don't like because then there's other problems downstream from that.
Right, because then you have to restage them.
Sometimes we just check out the commit before what it was for a temporary fix, go fix it, hot fix kind of thing, and then put it back in and undo the check out the commit before, pull down the new name.
Yeah.
I'm just talking out loud just for other experiences as far as dealing with that.
Yeah, I think it's on a case-by-case basis. So it's like, what is the experience for the user once this thing is broken? Like, what is the impact of that bug? And how quickly do you think you can fix it? If you think you can fix it fairly quickly, a hot fix is probably the way to go. If it's a really bad experience, or let's say it's even like a security issue, you may try to roll back to a previous release. It does get pretty hairy when you try to just like, I think, was it like you can revert the merge request, right? But then the history now says don't have these changes. So then you have to like cherry pick them. Oh, it can get fun. Yeah. So I think really it comes down to like gauging the impact and what your resourcing is available to approach the problem and resolve it. I think is the way to go. Yeah. All right. Thanks everybody for coming.